In today's video, I'm going to show you how to build a Canvas app version of this Microsoft form over here. It's not going to be a precise match. I went through and focused primarily on how to do the different questions. But if we come over here and hit the start now, and we come over here and we hit the start now, we'll see that we've got the same kinds of questions and the same type of process here. So if I select manager here, I can see the manager specific questions. If I get rid of it, I'll get rid of the manager questions. Similarly over here, if I hit the manager, I'll get the option for the manager questions, and then I can come through and I can select those, and then I can also work on all these other questions down here. And then similarly, if I come over here, I gotta select, I guess, and then we come over here, we've got a Likert option, and we have the Likert option in this also. So we go through exactly how to build this entire survey as part of this process. Now, if you like this kind of content, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. It really does help the channel grow. All right, let's go ahead and jump right into how to create this form using Canvas apps. All right, so I already built this solution and I've already done a little bit of the design. So I always recommend building your apps inside of solutions. So this is no different, as I went ahead and created a solution. And as you can see, there is really only one thing. I also started the app. So let's go ahead and open up this app here. Now I haven't done much on this app. I did create this start screen, and I'll just kind of walk you through the setup of what I've already done. I haven't actually done anything with the form, but I created this main screen here to kind of illustrate how you could make it look very similar to the Microsoft form approach here. So we've got our start that'll take us to our page. And if I hold my Alt key down here, we can go ahead and test this. And we can see that this page looks similar to how it would look in a Microsoft form. And then again, I added the back button here. Now this image right here, all I did was use a PowerPoint, and then I just used a gradient approach to kind of mimic what was going on there. I used PowerPoint quite a bit for building this kind of stuff. And then same thing here is just the text box, so you could put any kind of text that you want in here. I just kind of kept it the same as what we did again with the Microsoft form. And then I just changed the modern button. So I did turn on our modern settings. So if we come up here, I did a couple things. So we're going to use SharePoint for this. So I did turn on automatically create environment variables. And then if we come down to the update over here, we'll see that I turned on modern controls. And that's pretty much the extent of what I did in here. Now this right here is, again, just an image. So I put an image with text. As we can see over here, we have our survey title, and then we've got our image background. And if we look at this image, I just saved the PowerPoint file that I created as an image file, and then I put that as the image backdrop for this title here. And then if we go to our Start Now button, it's very simple. It just navigates us to our survey screen, and that's pretty much it. Now this image in the background here, I just pulled that from a Google search, try to find something very similar to what we use for the Microsoft form. This image was pretty similar, so I used that one as our background. And then we go back over here. I used it here, and all I did here is our container screen that we used here. So if we look at this color here, we'll see that I added a 50% translucent so we can kind of see through it, but not all the way. And I set that color as 214, 221, and 224. So that's kind of how you can mimic the look and feel of this. And then this is just a container here. And that's pretty much it. So all we have to do now is add our form into here. Now let's take a look at our SharePoint page for a second and see what I did with that setup. Now for our form, it's basically all the different questions that were in the Microsoft form. I went and recreated those over here. This is a little bit different than my last video where I did the setup for the SharePoint side here. When I use SharePoint, or even Dataverse for that matter, for doing kind of surveys, I typically like using number scales. So for example, instead of choosing from highly agree or disagree or any of that kind of stuff, I switch everything to number, and I would set the decimals to 0. And then we put it from 1 to 5. And you could do this with text also. So if you wanted to do drop-down choices, but I tend to think that using the numbers is a little bit more user-friendly. And then most of the time when I'm working with either this or Dataverse for surveys, I'm going to use Power BI or calculated fields to get me the text equivalent to whatever the number represents. But I find it a little bit easier to work with numbers instead of text. So that's why I go with this approach instead. I could change the text. For example, maybe next year with the survey, we don't want to have the exact same text. the numbers aren't going to change, so I'm not going to have to change that much with the design. I'll just have to change the text either in Power BI or the calculated fields, and then everything will kind of just update based off of that change. So I tend to think that numbers are just a little bit easier to work with. But if we were to look at all these different columns in here, they're all number columns for the most part. And then where there's text, obviously there is a multi-line text entry here for the other feedback. There is 1 or 2 questions in here that I've left as text options, just so we can illustrate that as part of the survey build, but the majority of these are number questions. Let's head back over to our Power App. All right, and back in here, let's go ahead and add our form in here, and then it'll be a SharePoint. So we'll find our SharePoint options here, and we'll find our COM team. That's where I built that, and we'll select our SharePoint site and connect. And then we'll go ahead and save our environment variables. All right, so now we've got our survey questions in here, and let's go ahead and add and make sure we've got them all, because that doesn't look like we've got all of them. So let's go ahead and add fields here, and let's go ahead and select everything here. So all right, these are all questions in here. All right, I think that might be everything here. Let's go ahead and hit add for all of those questions. All right, let's go ahead and collapse everything here. Let's get these all in the correct order. We've got all of them, just to make sure that we actually do have all of these questions here. And now for getting things into the correct order, we don't need the title field, so we'll just go ahead and remove that. And our first question is how long you've been in the organization. So we'll go ahead and move that to the top there. And then we've got what is our role. And then the smallest section is actually our management section. So I would normally put that here first, because if they select that they're a manager, then those questions would be the very next ones, followed by everything else. So that's kind of my thought process, but I'm going to go through and put these all in here and just make sure we have all the right questions and that they're in the correct order. All right, I think we've got them all in the proper order. Now I'm going to go ahead and add a bunch of custom cards here. We're going to use these as kind of like headers, and I think we're going to need probably, I don't know, 8 or 9 of these. So I'll just add a bunch, and then we'll delete the ones we don't need. That's probably a good start. So that's about 9. And the first one we're going to need is, well, I think what we'll do is we'll select them first, I guess. So when you add custom cards, they typically all go to the bottom here. And let's go ahead and rename these. So we're going to put names that basically identify what it's going to be, or kind of like what the focus of that data card is. So I'm going to go through and rename all these quick. All right, so they're all renamed here. And let's go ahead and select these. And again, you can just hold your shift key down in order to select these. And we've got them all. So now what we want to do is I want to change the width. And we're going to set that to parent, you got the width. And I want to set the height to 32. I don't want these to be really huge areas to work with here. All right, so I think that's probably about right. So if we go ahead and scroll down, we can see that they should have all been adjusted at this point. And let's go ahead and select this one. We'll look at it. Yep, it looks good. So I think we're about right there. Looks a little weird, but I think it'll be fine once we get it all built. So now what we want to do is we want to add a text field in here. So let's go ahead and insert text. And we'll go ahead and put this up at the top here. And we're going to go make this the width of this. Take the full space here. And we're going to do the same thing with the height. All right, so now it's filling that area. And let's go ahead and change this. Now this is going to be our respondent information. And let's go ahead and make that bold. I'm going to check our font weight. We'll make that bold. And we'll make this a little bit bigger text because it is a header. And then we'll go put this in the middle. And I think that's looking pretty good just like that. And let's go ahead and change this. We'll call this label respondent info header. Now I'm going to do the same thing for all of our other sections here. I'm just going to copy and paste this and put it in each one of these. Just like that, and then change each one to match the section that it's going to go into. All right, so now we've got them all in the correct order, and we've got the essentially these are going to be question headers. So when we're talking about the Likert questions, those are set up a little bit differently. So we're going to set them up like this. And we're going to do some more stuff with these, but I think that looks pretty good there. Now what we need to do is put them where they need to go. So let's go ahead and select our form. And then we're going to edit our fields. And then we're going to drag these to where they go. So this is the first thing. So we're going to drag it all the way up to the top here. And then we're going to take a look at our next one, which is our management support header. And we're going to move all of these to around where those questions are. All right, I think we've got them all grouped now. And let's go ahead and we'll make this a little bit smaller. And let's go ahead and select all of our questions. We want each one of these questions to take up all of the available space here on our width. So let's go ahead and grab all of these questions, and we're going to go ahead and unlock them. And then we're also going to make them width. Let's go ahead and select these questions here. All right, I think we've got them all. All right, so for the width, let's go ahead and make this parent.width. That way it takes up the full available space. And let's go over to our advanced and let's unlock these. We'll go ahead and adjust the required aspect a little bit later on. For now, I think that's looking pretty good here. Let's go ahead and unselect this now. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at our form just to remember what we're going to try to do here. So let's go take a look at that quick. So our first couple questions are radio buttons, and then we get into a Likert question. So let's go ahead and start working on these questions. So all we need to do is if we take a look at here, let's go ahead and copy this. And let's go ahead and insert our radio button option here. And we're going to go ahead and set this to be that choices option. So again, we'll see all those options in here. And we're going to have to make this a little bit taller. So let's go ahead and increase our height. We'll go to 200. Let's see how that looks here. And that is all of our options. So I think that looks pretty good. Now let's go ahead and take a look at our X is 24 and our Y is 36. Let's go ahead and copy that. So we want our X to be 24. And then let's go ahead and adjust our Y here. That way it's right where the other one was. And let's go ahead and change this. So we'll call this a radio group org length. I think that works pretty good. Now let's go ahead and adjust our question here. So we want this to be question number 1. So let's go ahead and we'll do 1 period, 2 spaces, and that, just like that. So now we have our question in there. And let's go ahead and select the entire question and hit update here. So we don't want to use our selection box here. We want to be able to use, and I'll just keep this in here as an example. We want to use our radio group selected. All right, that looks good there. And at this point, let's go ahead and delete this. We don't need it anymore. And we're going to go ahead and adjust this. So this is going to be our radio group. And we'll do the same thing here. And there we go. So now we've essentially made it look very, very similar to how it looks on our Microsoft form. Now I'm going to go ahead and do that for the other questions that also use radio group options. All right, so I went through and updated this one here. The next question is actually going to be a little bit different kind of a setup. So we're going to change that, but let's go ahead and adjust this. So we've got these questions here starting at 24. So let's go ahead and adjust the question here to 24. So it starts right around here. And then we'll want to make this a little bit smaller there. So we'll say minus 48. That looks pretty good there. So now we're aligned with the different question numbers. So I think that's a good way to set this up. So here we're talking about Likert questions. So what we need is radio group button, but we need to do it a little bit differently. So let's go ahead and insert a radio group option. And for this one, we're going to go ahead and set it as horizontal. And for this one, what we want to do is set it to numbers. So it's going to be 1, and we'll make it 2, and then we'll make it 3. Oops. Now let's go ahead and add our 4 and our 5. So we've got 5 options that it can be. We don't need it to be quite so big. So let's make this a little bit smaller here. Let's go ahead with a height of 40 maybe. Yep, that looks good. And then we'll go ahead and move this over here and online with the question. We'll give ourselves a little bit of space here. We don't need this to be quite so wide, so we'll make it, I don't know, so 300 maybe. See how that looks? I think we can go a little bit smaller. Yeah, there we go. So that looks pretty good. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Let's go back and take a look at our form here quick. So now what we need to do is we need to put our header at the top here. So we're going to go ahead and add that in here. And to do that, we're going to use this area here. So let's go ahead and insert a text option here. And we'll go ahead and move this down. So we'll send it to the back. And this is going to be our label Likert header image or question. And we'll go ahead and move this over here. Make it a little bit bigger. Give ourselves some room to work with. And then I'm going to go ahead and type our options into here quick. All right, that's looking pretty good there. Now what we need to do is change our update property here. And we're going to go ahead and move this down. Again, I always like keeping the previous version in there. And we'll go with radio group enabled to support dot selected dot value. All right, so now we can go ahead and get rid of this. We don't need this anymore. And let's go ahead and update our options here and here also. All right, so that's looking pretty good there. Now we're going to do the exact same thing for these other 2 here. So all we're going to do is just copy this and paste it in here. So it'll be in the same place, and same thing here. And then I'm going to go ahead and make adjustments so that these all fit properly and adjust the update property just like we did here for the rest of these. All right, so I've gone through and updated those. Now, you could, in theory, make these a little bit thinner here, but we have the error cards. If you want to have the error cards, then you're probably going to need a little bit more in here, but you could also do that dynamically if you wanted to, where there's an error, it expands, it gets a little bit bigger. But if you wanted this a little bit more compressed in there, you could do that. Now, these are a little bit off of where we want them to be. So ideally, I'd like to have the question indented a little bit for these. So we're going to go ahead and make these a little bit smaller. So we're going to decrease this a little bit more. So we're going to make it a little bit smaller there. And then we're going to go ahead and put this in. We'll try 34 and see what that looks like. So that was our 10 change there. So let's go ahead and make it 40. Yeah, I think 45 is probably going to do it. So 45. Yep, there we go. So we've got a little bit of an indent there. And let's go ahead and change this. So we went to 45 from 24. So we'll just go with 68. I think that's probably good enough. Perfect. So then we'll do the same thing with the rest of these. All right, that's looking pretty good. So that's mirroring what we saw with the Microsoft form. Again, we could compress these a little bit, but I do want to have those error bars. Now let's go back up to the top here. I do want to make these questions required. So we're going to have this one as a required question. And we'll do this one as a required question. Now, this one is only visible or required when it's a manager. So what we need to do is take a look at our radio group here. So that was our radio group job role, and we want that to be what makes these questions visible. So we're going to go ahead and select this one, and then our successes of managers. We'll select both of those, and then we're going to look for our we're going to look for our I am enabled. So let's find that question here. And then I have adequate tools. And the organization has provided. All right, so now we've got all of our management questions. So let's go to our visibility property here. And we're going to change this, and we're going to say if our radio group job role dot selected dot value equals manager, true, false, and then close this off. And we can go ahead and test this. If we click the manager option here, it becomes visible. And if we select our individual contributor, it goes away. Now, we also need to pay attention to our question number. Now, whenever it's a manager, this will always be question 3. When it's an individual contributor, these are going to be question 4, 5, 6. So these are going to be renumbered from this point on. 6 isn't actually going to be 6. It'll have to renumber also. So we're going to have to adjust this a little bit based off of, again, what was the outcome of this box here. So we're going to use that as kind of our determination for the rest of these question numbering. So let's just keep that in mind as we go through here. Let's go ahead and select our manager again, because we're going to reuse our Likert option here. And let's go ahead and take a look at our overall, how satisfied are you with your current employer question? Now, this is an interesting question because, as you can see, this is a number option, but this is going to be one where we're going to try a little bit different take on this. So we're going to use a radio button. So let's go ahead and add a radio button in here. So we'll say our radio option here. So let's adjust this. And for this one, it's going to be our choices. So we're going to say extremely dissatisfied. And then our option number 2 is going to be somewhat dissatisfied. All right, that looks good. Let's go ahead and make the height a little bit higher. So we'll say this is 200. See how that looks? We can be a little bit smaller than that. Go with 180 and 170. Yep, there we go. So that looks good just like that. And let's take a look at this. We've got 24. Again, we'll copy our Y. And we'll go with 24. And then we'll paste our Y into here. All right. So now what we need to do is we're going to try to update number based off of text. And again, if you use numbers, that works great. But if you want to display text but still use numbers, this is going to be how you would handle that specific scenario. So let's take a look at our update property here. And let's go ahead and take this in here. So again, we're trying to put it a value. So it needs a number. So let's go ahead and move this down a little bit, give ourselves some space. In this case, we're going to give ourselves a little bit more space here. All right, so let's go ahead and put this in here. So it's going to be, we're going to use a switch. So a switch, and it's going to be based on our RG satisfied. Selected value. And, oops. Let's go ahead and do our first option, which is extremely dissatisfied. And that'll be a 1. So that'll be our first. And then we need to do is create this for each option. All right, so that looks good there. And if nothing is selected, we've got blank going back, but it won't be an option because we're going to make this a required field. So you'll have to select something. So blank really can't be possible. But if it does try to get to submit, that's what you would eventually have, is a blank. Whether you have this or not is kind of irrelevant probably for the design, but this is probably the best mechanics for how to do this. So that's why I'm going to put that in there. Now let's go ahead and get rid of this so we can create our error. And then let's go ahead and edit this. And again, this is going to be our satisfied. And same thing here. And let's go ahead, and everything's looking good now. Now, the number is going to be different based on the outcome. So let's go ahead and do another switch. And we'll go ahead and add this in here right away. And I'll go ahead and hit the and in here so that we, all right, I think that looks good there. Let's go ahead and try that. So let's minimize this and come up here and select our individual contributor. And then we're at question number 3, or we're at question number 4. So that's working exactly the way that we want it to. All right, let's go to the next question here. And on this one, we have our, on a scale of 0 to 10, how likely are you to recommend your workplace to others? And this one is a Net Promoter Score question. And what we're going to do is an interesting approach for how to handle a Net Promoter Score question as part of a Power App. All right, let's go ahead and adjust. We'll actually just copy our approach here, and we're going to copy, let's see, all of this actually. So let's just do that. And that'll be our question 5. So let's go ahead and paste that in here. And this one will be 4 or 5. There we go. So now we've got our question number done in there. And now what we need to do is we need to build a logic for how do you select from 0 to 10. And let's go ahead and insert a container. And we use a horizontal container for this. And again, we'll put that on our X of 24. And let's go ahead. Again, this is a number, so we're going to make this width match that. So we parent that width minus 48 is pretty much everything. And we don't need it to be quite so tall. Let's go ahead and make this a little bit smaller here. And well, I'll make it a little bit bigger than that. We'll go with 42. All right. Now we can, let's just call this our cleaner NPS logic. All right, let's go ahead and insert a button in here. All right, and we'll go ahead and set the text of that to be 0. And then on select, let's go ahead and do update context. And we're gonna go ahead and put that to local NPS score. We're gonna go ahead and put that as value self.text and close this out. All right. Now let's go ahead and test this quick, make sure that we're on the right path. So we'll add a text over here and we'll make this local NPS score. And let's play for this for a second. And we've gotten 0. All right, so that's working. Now let's go ahead and take a look at our appearance here. So we've got our type. And if we change this to secondary, that's what we want it to look like when it is not selected. So let's go back to primary here. And what we're going to do is we're going to add an if, and we're going to say local NPS score equals the value self.text. We want it to be our primary. Otherwise, and we'll just go ahead and copy this. We want it to be our secondary. And then let's go ahead and close that. So that looks about right. Now let's go ahead and copy this and paste. And this one, we want the text to be 1. So we've selected our 0. So if I hold the Alt down, we can see that that is working as expected. Now what we need is a couple more buttons. So let's go ahead and copy this. So that'll be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Let's go ahead and make sure that we got the right numbers here. So we'll make that 2. Oops. 2. This one is 3. This one can be 4. Selecting these is not working well. Oh, I know what it is. Yeah, this is always, you gotta like click out of the box. You can't just click the next item. I always forget about that with these modern controls. So we have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we have 6. And we'll have 7 here. We'll have 8. And 9. So we need one more. So let's go ahead and copy this. And that will be our 10. All right, so now we've got all of our buttons. Let's go ahead and change the names of all these. And we'll just say button 0. All right, so I've changed all the names. Now let's actually select all of these. And we're going to want to change the width so we can fit them all in here. So we're going to adjust our width here. We'll try 80. See how that looks. That's actually pretty good right there. Let's see. Yeah, that's actually not bad. Fits pretty good. Yep, I think that will work. So now if we select it, everything is working. Now, what do we want this to be when the page loads? Do we want it to be blank, so essentially nothing is selected, or do we want the default to be a number? So what we can do is, let's go ahead and just take a look at our update context here. And let's copy this, and then we're going to take a look at our page on visible. We'll go ahead and paste that in there. But what we want to do is probably go with blank. So we'll set blank. And let's go ahead and go back to our previous page here. And then we'll start again. And then we'll see what that's going to look like. So it's going to leave everything not selected. So I think that looks pretty good. And let's go ahead and get rid of our helper box here. So delete that. I think that's looking pretty good. Yeah, that's not bad. Now you could also, if you don't like blue or you want to have something a little darker, or you want to change up the colors, you can always put a hex color in there also using color value. So that's always an option also, but I tend to think these look pretty good and it'll adjust. So if I change the primary color of this, it will adjust with that also. So it keeps it in sync with the theme that we set as part of this. Now I did set a theme. I always set a theme when I build these things. So here's my Office Solution theme here. So I set the hex code right there. So that's kind of the theme I use. And I typically use Arial also. So let's go ahead and go back over here. All right. So we have now done a radio button question selection like this. And we've done that a couple different times here. And then we've also done our manager button here. So we've got our Likert scale. Now that is essentially all of the questions. There's a lot of other Likert questions on here, but for the most part, they're all a type that we've already done as part of this. The only other question that is a little bit different is right here. Now for that one, let's go ahead and take a look at our numbers again. So we're going to go ahead and select this. Let's make this a little bit bigger here. And we'll go ahead and copy that. And then we'll come back down here. Let's go ahead and add that numbering theme on here. So we'll paste that in there. And for this one, it's going to be either 9 or 10. All right, so that'll be our last question. So that's looking pretty good. So we've got our, essentially how this is all set up here. Now the last question is, again, something we haven't done yet. So we're going to adjust this a little bit here. Now we can set a limit on the length here. And I usually actually recommend doing that. You don't necessarily want a novel, but maybe we want to have it something like, I don't know, 4,000 characters. That's plenty of complaining for employees. Typically, if you're going to write down that much, you're talking some, negative things, but you could make that a lot shorter or a lot longer depending on your kind of use case here. Now, the trigger output, I usually recommend if you're going to have the very last question be something like this, is you would put it as a key press. And when we add the save button on here, that's going to be important. If you type in the box and you don't change this to key press, it's not going to let you go from the box straight to the save button. It's essentially waiting for you to click someplace else on the form in order for you to be able to see that button or to click that button if this is a required field. Now, in this case, we're not going to make it a required field, but just to make it a little easier on the user, we're going to go ahead and do it this way. And we want to change the mode to multi-line. All right, so that's looking pretty good in there. I think we're going to make it a little bit taller here. So maybe we'll try 100 and see what that looks like. And let's go scroll down, give them a little bit more space to type in the box here. I think that looks pretty good for that. All right, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and update the rest of this so we can kind of see what this entire thing is going to look like finished. Again, it's all the same kinds of questions that we've already accomplished up here. So you can kind of rewatch this. I don't want to make this video, 6 hours long as I create the satisfaction survey. But I want to show you kind of what the end product is, and then we're going to work on the save mechanism as part of this process as well. All right, I went through and updated everything. So now all of the questions have been updated to radial dials here. And then we've got the options above each of the questions as well. Now I did notice that we didn't quite complete this, so we got to get rid of this option back here. And then we do need to change our container a little bit. So let's go ahead and change this right away. So this is going to be our container. So let's find our container here quick. So this is going to be our container NPS logic and our container NPS logic here. All right, so that's good now. Now we come back here to our edit option, and our update is going to be our NPS score that we created, just like that. Now for our container, we want to get rid of the border here. So let's get rid of that. And now it's looking pretty good. Okay, so now all of our questions have been updated, and we've got all of our radial dials. Oops. So everything's looking good. Now we need to have a way to hit the submit button. So we're going to put that at the bottom of the form. So you have to get all the way to the bottom in order to see the submit button. So let's go ahead and select our form here, edit fields, and then we're going to add another custom field. And let's go to the bottom here. And we've got our new card here. So this will be our form buttons. All right, and let's go ahead and select that. We want to make, again, parent.width. And we'll make this 42. And let's go ahead and add a button in here. And we'll put that like right around the top here. And let's go ahead and make this a little bit bigger. So we'll make this, I don't know, 52. Just give ourselves a little bit more space to work with. Yep, that looks about right. And now we want to have this button going to be our submit. Perfect. And let's go to our on select, and it's going to be a submit form survey. That looks good, just like that. All right, let's go ahead and make this a little, get rid of that. And what we're going to want to do is in our form, let's go ahead and select our form here. We want to have our on success. And for our on success, let's go ahead and do notify successfully submitted. And then we'll go ahead and do a notification type of success. And we'll do just a quick screen share there. And then what we're going to want to do is add another screen. So let's go ahead and collapse this down a little bit here. So let's go ahead and select our screen, new screen, and let's go ahead and, I think there's a thank you option or a success. That's pretty good. We can use the success option here. Yeah, I think that's a good choice. We'll use success. And we'll say the survey was successfully completed. And let's go ahead and just make this a little bit bigger. So we'll select our circle there, and we'll make that, I don't know, 400 by 400. I think that looks pretty good. And we can make this a little bit bigger. We'll put this up here like this. And we'll make our text 30. Okay, I think that looks good. So let's go back to our survey screen here. And we'll go to the bottom. Yep, that looks fine. Now we want to navigate. So let's go to our on success again. And we're going to do a navigate to our screen 1. And we're going to do, I don't know, we'll do cover right. Okay, that works. So let's come back down here. And this is going to be our success screen. Okay, that looks good there. So they're going to complete this form, and then it will take them to the next page. All right, let's go ahead and test this now. So let's get play. And we'll go ahead and say less than a year, manager, We'll do 2, 2, 2, doesn't really matter. This one, check this one, that. And keep selecting all the different options. And there we go. And then we'll go ahead and put some text in here, and we'll say test, and we're going to submit. And it's successfully submitted. Now let's go to our SharePoint portal and just confirm that we've got an entry in our SharePoint portal. All right, so here is our SharePoint portal. Let's go ahead and refresh the page. And we've got a submission. So everything is working. Let's just go, yep, we've got our comments there, and everything is working as expected. So perfect, that's exactly what we're looking for. All right, let's go back to our Power App here, and let's go ahead and close this. Take a look at our survey screen. And if we look at this, I think we're pretty much done with the survey. So yeah, everything is working as expected. Now, we want to go back to our main screen here. And we might want to add some logic about what if you've already completed the survey? Maybe you only want them to complete the survey one time. So how would we do that? Let's go to our app. And let's go ahead and put our standard on start information in here quick. All right, let's go ahead and put that in there. So that's just our normal process. So whenever they load up the app, all this information is going to load based off the user function. So we're going to get their full name, their email, and their image. We don't actually need all of that information, but again, I just copy and paste, and you can always remove this if you don't need it. Really all we need is the email address here. But I just generally copy and paste everything in there. All right, so that looks good. Now we want to make sure is they can't hit the Start Now button if the logged in user has already completed a survey. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna make this button not visible. So let's take a look at our visibility here. And you could also do is disabled. So if you wanted to do that, you could do that. That way they could see the button there, and it's disabled. And then what we could also do is change the text. And actually, now that I'm thinking about it, that might be a little bit better, except for the button will be a little bit longer for the text. So I think we'll go with the visibility now that I think about it. So let's go ahead and add a lookup. And what we want to do is just look up and see if the person that's logged in has completed it. So created by is going to be how we record who completed it. So, and that's going to be equal to our user email. All right, so that looks good. But we need a Boolean. So what we need to do is ask the question, is it blank? And the answer to that will either be true or false. Now I've submitted a survey, so it is not showing there. Now we want to display a message based on this. So let's go ahead and copy this since we've already got it in there. And we can change the text here since we've already got this text on the screen. So let's go ahead and we'll make our width a little bit longer here. So we'll say 500 is probably more than enough. And what we're going to do is change our text. And we're going to do an is blank. So that's a true or a false. And we're going to say if, we want to say you are invited, or we want to say you have already completed the survey. There we go. So I've already completed the survey. So it's displaying that way. But let's test this. Let's go ahead and delete my previous survey. So let's go back over to our SharePoint site quick. And let's go ahead and delete these out of here. And let's go back to our Power App. And let's go ahead and refresh our SharePoint site here. And there we go. So I haven't completed a survey, so now I have the ability to complete one, so I can hit the Start Now button. Once I've completed this, I'll get the thank you screen in there, and I won't be able to complete the survey again. So that's essentially most of the logic that we've got on our Microsoft form. Now, we might want to go through and, again, make these required. So in the case of our individual contributor, we make all these different questions only. We don't have the manager question. But if we click on the manager option here, we have these questions. So let's go look at these quick and let's take a look at how this is done. And we can use the visibility. So we just copy this and we can use that to do this process. So let's find these questions here. So I'm enabled, and then I've got to find our I have adequate tools. And then we're going to find our the organization has provided adequate. So let's find our the organization has provided. All right, so that's those. And we want to make these required. So let's go to our required field. And all we're going to do is paste that in. And now they're required. And we could also change the location to align the asterisks throughout this. I'm not going to focus on that. It's pretty simple to kind of go through and just adjust to make sure that you've got the asterisks in the same place as everything else. But let's go ahead and now we want to do is our other fields. Now, these could be required for everybody. So what you want to do is make the determination of which fields are going to be required. I'm going to say all of these are required. So I'm going to go through and make every single one of these questions a required field. All right, so I went through and made everything required except for the last question. Any feedback should be optional, so they're not required to provide feedback. Now, what you could also do is, if this is required, so if we take a look at this, we can take a look at the visibility, and we can say, basically, this determines if it's required or not. Now, you could use the same kind of logic and just add it on to the question if you wanted to. Maybe you want to relocate these so that they're at the end, or you want to just kind of move all of these indented questions so that the asterisk is a little closer to the question. Kind of up to you on what you want to do here, on how you make this look. I think it looks fine the way that it is. I do think the asterisk could probably be a little bit closer. So if it was me, I would probably go through and adjust all these asterisks inward so that it looks a little bit more like that. I think that looks a little bit better as we take a look at this. But creating this was really just that simple. So let's go ahead and actually give this a try here. So let's play this. Oh, we got to make sure that we set this to new form here. So let's go ahead and do that. And I think I might just need to reset because I think I already have this set as a new form. But let's just confirm that. Yep, I've got it to new. So we need to do a reset because we've submitted something. So let's add a button. Since the user can't really do this, this is just a thing that we need to do in order to build this. We'll add a reset form button here on here. And let's reset this quick and hit play. So now we can actually go through this. Manager, yep, that's required. And let's go ahead and fill this out again. Now, what would happen if I hit save right now? So let's hit the submit button and we should get all the errors. Now, you would want to go through and adjust all these error messages so that they're placed where you want them to be. I didn't go through and actually do all those adjustments. You're going to have to do that, make sure that it's kind of spaced where you want it to so that it looks a little bit better when it's got a lot of errors like this. So you'd want to basically hit the error right off the bat. Don't click any buttons and see where all those are. We're not going to do that as part of this process. I think we've kind of demonstrated how this works, and it looks like we still got to adjust getting rid of that also. So again, you don't need the reset button. And we definitely don't need this text field anymore, so let's get rid of that. And I think we're good. Now, there could be another thing that you might want to do. Let's go back to the start screen here. Now, we made it so that when the user has already completed it, that's pretty much it. They hit the screen and it says it's already been completed. But in our Microsoft form, you have the ability to view your response. And most of the time, I don't do this, but there is a way to do that as well when you're doing this process. Now, if we come back to our survey, one of the things we didn't do is we didn't set the default selected items. So since we replaced pretty much every control on this page, nothing's going to load correctly. So what we need to do is come in here, and for each of these, we need to set the default selected item. Now, for this one, for example, it would just be parent.default. And that would normally fix most of these. And it would be kind of the same for this one. Now, this one is a little bit different. So let's try parent.default and see what happens. And we'll see we'll get an error. Because remember, this is actually a number. So we have to actually go with a different approach for how we do this one. So let's go up here and we're going to use another switch statement for this. So we'll do switch, and it's going to be based on parent.default. That'll be kind of our switching area here. And the first option we've got is 1, right? So it's always numbers. And 1 is equal to our extremely dissatisfied. And then we would add in 2, 3, 4, and 5 in here as well. But we need to also create it like a table, because remember, this is a table right here. So we're going to go ahead and make it essentially a table. So let's go ahead and add our brackets in here like this is a table. And we'll go down here and close this off. And now it works. So now everything is loading up the way that it's supposed to. Now let's go down and take a look at these. Now these are numbers, but again, this is essentially kind of like a table. So parent.default won't work for this either, but let's go ahead and confirm that. So we get the error. Now, unfortunately, this is actually a little bit more complicated to address. So Power Apps handles these text fields a little bit better than it does with numbers. And you gotta remember, we're working with tables, so this turns into kind of a complicated process. But what we need to do is first, we need to do an isBlank to account for when our parent.default is blank. And we wanna go with blank, or we wanna do filter. And for our filter, we want to filter the table. And in this case, let's hit enter here. Our table is going to be value of 1. And we're going to go ahead and close this off. And we're going to do the exact same thing for 2, 3, 4, and 5. So we're just going to go ahead and copy this. And we'll change these to 2, 3, 4, and 5. All right. And now what we're going to do is close this out. And then we're going to say value is equal to text parent.default. And we're going to go ahead and close this one off. And we're going to go ahead and close this one off. Oh, one too many. There we go. All right, so let's go ahead and format text. Like I said, a little bit more complicated for numbers. So this is essentially what we need to do. And I'm going to go ahead and just copy this. And I'm going to go through and update all of these to use this approach here. And then we'll go ahead and give this a try. Then we're going to go ahead and make some changes to our start screen. All right, I've pretty much adjusted everything except for our Net Promoter Score. We'll do that one last, but let's go ahead and go back to our start screen, and we're going to make some adjustments there first before we work on the Net Promoter Score, so we can kind of see that this stuff is working before we start working on the Net Promoter Score. And I'm actually going to go to the app logic here, and we're going to take a look at our on start. And let's go ahead and take a look at our logic here. So what we want to do is create a variable. So let's go ahead and set. This is going to be our user survey. And we're going to want to do a lookup to our employee satisfaction table based on created by dot email equal to our GBL user email. And we'll go ahead and close this out. And our set function out. And right now I don't have a record that I've completed, so we're gonna have to actually test this out. Now, when we hit this button, we're gonna wanna change some of this logic here. So we're gonna wanna navigate, and we're gonna do if is blank, GBL user survey, and we wanna be new form survey, or edit form survey. And we can go ahead and close out these functions here. And it looks like everything is working. And let's go ahead and add this so I don't forget to do that next time. So essentially, if this is blank, then we're going to do a new form. Otherwise, it's going to be edit form. Now, what we need to do is go back to our form, and we need to set the item property to our GBL user survey. That way, the default is going to be this survey information. All right, so let's go ahead and hit play here. Let's create one so we've got something that can populate this. So we'll do less than this, and we'll do the manager. And for this, we'll do a cross section here. And we'll do 4, and then we'll do the NPS here in a second also. 4. Let's go this way this time. And here we go. And test submission. All right, let's hit submit. Everything's working there. Let's go ahead and go back to our start screen here. And we don't see the button anymore. So let's go ahead and adjust this now. Now with this design, we actually do want to see our button. So we're going to change things up a little bit, and we're going to use our visibility. Where is our visible? Okay, so we're going to adjust this. I'm going to copy this, and we're going to make this true. And we're going to say, we're going to use that visibility to change this. So if, and like that. So now we can view our survey. Now let's go ahead and run our app on start here. And let's go ahead and view our survey. And the reason why we have to do the on start, normally when you refresh the screen, because that's the only way the user can get back to this screen, the app on start is going to run. We didn't do that because we're in our editing mode here, so we didn't actually run the app on start. So let's try this now. All right, so let's take a look at this. And it looks like everything is loading. And again, we didn't do NPS, so that's not going to load, but everything does look like it's working correctly. Now, in the case of our Net Promoter Score, this is actually pretty easy. So all we had to do is we need this to load as part of the page. And remember, on our onVisible, we have it updating to blank. So we don't want it to do that anymore. So let's go ahead and delete that. And what we're going to do is an if, and we're going to say is blank. And then we're going to find our survey. And if this is blank, then we want it to be blank. Otherwise, we want it to be our survey again. And in this case, it's going to be our on a scale. Just close that off, close this off, and then close the function off. All right, so now that should be right. So let's go try it. We'll hit the back button here and then view the survey. And if we scroll down, there we go. Now it is working. But as we can see, I made this edit. So if you wanted to be able to allow the user to edit their survey, this is working exactly the way that you would want to have it work. It allows them to make their edits and submit it. All right, let's go back to our main page here and make this view only. And let's take a look at our button here. And yeah, right now we're having it as edit form. We might want them to do view form. All right, and as we can see, everything is working. Except for, we can see there's an issue here. Now we can actually see that 4 is selected because the size is a little bit different than everything else, but it doesn't actually work with the modern controls inside of a form. So let me explain. Everything else is working just fine as we can tell. But if we come up here and we look at the Net Promoter Scores, there's kind of an unusual issue with the modern controls that you don't have a problem with this with the classic controls. But if you're trying to use the modern buttons in this capacity, no matter what you do, if we go ahead and select button 0, for example, here, no matter what you do, let's say we change our type here, it's already in display mode edit. Nothing changes this. And even if we come over here and let's say we select the actual data card, Right now it's in parent display mode, so whatever the parent is in. If we go ahead and move this, let's go ahead and say we put it in to display mode edit, it doesn't resolve the problem. So no matter what you do, the modern controls just don't work. Whenever the form is in a view only mode, it overrides what's going to happen with these buttons. So you're not going to be able to do anything to really differentiate these buttons. So what are your options if you want to use the modern controls? Well, there's not a really good option for this, but I'm going to show you a couple different things you can. Like I said, the biggest fix for this is to use the classic controls, and then everything will work and you can kind of control how this looks and feels. But again, they don't look like the modern controls. That's why a lot of people like these. The look is just a little bit nicer, in my opinion, on how they're set up. But you can get really close using a classic control. What other options could you do? Now, let's go back to this page here. Let's go ahead and put this back into edit form view. And I'm going to show you kind of the option that I like the most. So let's go ahead and do this quick. All right, so now we're in edit view. And I happen to think edit view looks a lot better than the view only. I don't know why Microsoft insists on making it such a drastic difference. I tend to think that this looks pretty good, and if the user tries to click on something, it'll be pretty obvious that you can't do anything and it's in view only mode, but that's not how they built it. So what can we do? Let's go ahead and click into here. This is what I use a lot of times inside of galleries, and then for forms like this where I want to use modern controls and it doesn't quite work right. What I'll do is I'll go up here and hit insert rectangle. So let's go ahead and do that quick. And I'm going to do is just cover up all these buttons. Just like that. And then we're going to go ahead and get rid of the color here. And then I believe there's a border on here, so we'll get rid of that also. And we'll say none. All right, let's go ahead and play this. And all of a sudden I can't click and I can still scroll. Now you could do this on a larger scale and put a rectangle over the entire form. But if you put a rectangle over the entire form and just kind of cover it up, you got to make sure that you give the user the ability to scroll. So you have to basically keep the sides open. And if they try to scroll from the center, it won't work. This approach where you put it inside the data cards and just cover up whatever they can't click prevents them. And then it also maintains the ability to scroll. So you get the best of both worlds. But what we need to do is we also need to make it so that they can click on these buttons when it's in new form mode. So we're going to come back over here and we're going to take a look at our visibility. And we're going to go ahead and say if is blank. And then we'll find our survey. So if it's blank, meaning it's a new survey, we want this to be false. Otherwise, we want it to be true. And all of a sudden the rectangle goes away. So they can't click it when it's in edit. But if I was to switch it into new form mode, this would work. I'd be able to actually come in here and click over this. So again, a little bit more work because you got to come back here and put rectangles over all of these. And what I would normally do is I would build the one that I actually need, and then I would copy that because the logic is already in there. The visibility is already set. All I have to do is adjust the dimensions, and then the user can't click these anymore. But until you do that, they'll be able to click all of these. So if I go ahead, I can click on all of these and interact with all of these. So that's what you would want to do to kind of fix that issue for the user. And again, you're going to want to make sure you pay attention to how everything's all lined up and make sure everything fits correctly. But that is a workaround to getting this to work inside of one of these forms. All right, that is pretty much it for today's video. Hopefully you found the content helpful. Don't forget that like and subscribe button if you like this kind of content. Let me know in the comments, is there anything else regarding surveys or forms like this kind of a setup that you would like me to cover as part of this channel? All right, until next time.